Hey guys, welcome back. So, gosh, I guess it's been a couple years ago I did a little video talking about the MAS36 rifle, and I asked if you guys were interested in seeing more rifles like that. And by that I mean older bolt-action rifles from the World War I, World War II period, and even post-war rifles, which we're going to talk about a little bit here today. So the rifle that I showed in that short little video clip was the MAS36. It was this little rifle. The MAS36, as its name implies, was adopted right around 1936, but when the Germans invaded France, the French forces were woefully unprepared for the invasion. They really thought the Maginot Line was going to save them. They thought that it would be impossible for Germany to invade France, but the Germans managed to pull it off, and the French forces had a whole mixture of rifles. Not very many units would be issued the MAS36 rifle. You would still find Lebel rifles and Berthier carbines and rifles being used in conjunction with the MAS36, plus they would throw in some SMLE rifles and stuff like that from the Brits. The French used a wide variety of bolt-action rifles during the Second World War. This rifle would go on to be used after the war in Algeria and Madagascar and other places where France would be involved in conflicts. But during the Second World War, these rifles weren't the most common French rifle that would be seen in the hands of French forces during the conflict. Now, granted, France fell to Germany fairly quickly, so you had Free French forces that were fighting at Dunkirk when the Brits took all their soldiers off the beaches. They took a lot of French soldiers with them, and the Brits noticed that they had a mixture again of MAS36s and Berthier rifles and carbines and Lebels and even older rifles than that. So the French forces were armed with just a whole bunch of different firearms. But after the war, this rifle would go on to be manufactured and would be used around the globe in various conflicts that the French would be involved in. But it would evolve. Now let's talk about the MAS36 and its interesting design. So the rifle kind of reflects French military doctrine, which was they weren't supposed to do anything unless they were told to do, they being the soldiers, anything unless they were told to do so by their officers. So you'll notice that the MAS36 does not have a manual safety. It has no safety. That's because the rifle was intended to be loaded with an empty chamber, bolt closed, and when given the order, French forces would then load their rifles and start shooting. Well, this practice proved to be a faulty practice during the Second World War, and after the war, the lack of a safety on these rifles became a problem for the French. Also worth noting is that the French did not want their soldiers messing with the sights. These rifles would be sighted in by armorers and then issued to troops. There's no facilities for troops to easily adjust their sights in the field. They were set to BZO, to 0, and issued, and that's how they were to be used. And so you'll notice that this rifle has a hooded front sight that's protected, has a very big coarse front sight. We have a rear sight here that's non-windage adjustable, but you have elevation adjustment out to a very optimistic 1,200 meters. The rifles also incorporated a rather ingenious design, and that would be the inclusion of a bayonet, if I can get him out of here, just underneath the barrel. Fits a little bit tightly, but there's the bayonet for the MAS36 stored underneath the barrel. When it wasn't in use, the French soldiers would put it away, and there it would stay. Retained was a stacking post for stacking the rifles in camp. They had sling swivels on the side of the rifle, and the barrel was fully encased in wood. Now, these are a very durable design. The MAS36 is extremely tough. That, and just about every example I've ever fired, has one of the crudest, grittiest actions I've ever felt, where you have the buttery smooth action of the #4 Enfields or even the K98 or any of the 98 series Mausers, the 1903 Springfield, which is a Mauser Arasaka, which is a Mauser. All those rifles have very, very smooth actions. Every single MAS36 and variants of this rifle I've fired have been not so smooth. However, extremely robust. Another rifle I brought out this afternoon is a post-war design, and this is the MAS3651. The French, after World War II, moved to using rifle grenades extensively. They really thought that rifle grenades, both anti-personnel, anti-armor, they thought that that was the way of the future. And so they made modifications to the MAS36, and this one is a 3651, meaning in 1951, this rifle would have been manufactured. Now keep in mind, the French were fighting all over the place, including in Indochina, where the 36 and 3651 would be used amongst other places, but there's a number of notable changes that were made to the Model 51. You have the inclusion of a grenade sight, and on the end here you have the facilities for a 22mm NATO grenade. Now there was a rifle that predates this one, and it's the LG48 or something like that. It was made for a brief period, which used 50mm rifle grenades, which the French first started using, but that quickly became obsolete. They wanted to standardize on the NATO 22mm standard, so that's where the 3651 comes in. Now it has an interesting little worm screw on the side here that you can turn, and this, you'll notice, is adjusting this ring back and forth. And you had your ranges here on the inside of the grenade sight. It was really interesting to see how intricate the grenade launching capabilities are of this rifle, and this system would carry over later into their self-loading rifles, which I'm going to briefly touch upon in this video, which I brought out in early MAS1944, MAS44. The French were messing with direct gas impingement self-loading rifles in the 30s, but they didn't get them into production before Germany invaded. Those plans were shelved, and they did everything they could just to manufacture the Model 36. It wouldn't be until after the war that the French would continue the development of the semi-automatic direct gas impingement Model 44, which then would become the Model 49, and that rifle would have been used extensively as well in the later years of the Indochina War that the French were involved in. It's also interesting to note that the rear sight was retained on the 3651, but the front sight, instead of being completely enclosed, is now open, but they also truncated the stacking ring. They kept it, and they also kept the bayonet. But it's interesting to note that bayonet, when you take a look at the grenade launching feature of the 51, you don't have a whole lot of sticking you can do with the bayonet. So it's kind of interesting that it was carried over into this design without modification, really. So let's do some shooting with these rifles. They're very interesting rifles, and I love French military rifles. We'll do some shooting with both the Model 51, the standard Model 36, and then I want to show you the Model 44 that I have, and I have other series of direct gas impingement semi-automatic French rifles that I'll do a separate video on, all the way up to the Model 49 and its later derivatives that were actually really, really good service weapons. So let's take a closer look at these rifles, do a little bit of shooting with them, and just have some fun this afternoon. Got that gritty action. The trigger is not bad. Comes back and is not very stagey or anything. It hits the shelf, and then as soon as you pull a little bit past that, it goes bang. all in all, it's a very robust, again, very, very well built rifle. To charge it, you take a 5-round stripper clip. It has a standard stripper guide in there. Just drop the stripper clip in, push on the rear of the top cartridge, and the rifle is reloaded. Now when the gun is empty, the follower pops up and you won't be able to close the bolt, so the soldier knows that the weapon needs to be reloaded. It's a very short, handy little carbine, and it's a real pleasant little gun to shoot. It's very comfortable, kind of a short stock, but overall I would say this is a very good military bolt action rifle. Let's do a little bit of shooting with the Model 51, which is a bit longer, a bit heavier, and has that recoil pad. I will say that the Model 3651 is probably my favorite version of the rifle. I do like the little carbine, it's really handy. The sight picture really hasn't changed much. Like I said, they opened it up where you just have protective ears versus a full circle, but it's just, I don't know, a bit more pleasant to shoot. Now you can take these rubber butt pads, which are available in places like eBay and stuff like that, and you can put one on your Model 36, and that gives you a little bit extra length of pull, which I do like, but I can take this off. Maintained are the sling swivels. You still have that loop here in the front and the traditional swivel here in the back. But yeah, it's a very, very nice rifle. Now, the action itself is maintained from the original Model 36. So if you want to field strip it, all you have to do is pull the trigger, pull the bolt to the rear, and the bolt comes out. Now you can punch your bore, clean the rifle, all that good stuff. The magazine itself, you have little buttons here you can press, and the magazine will pop right out. So now you can clean through the action of the gun and clean the magazine should you need to in the field. Go ahead and charge the rifle. All right. Just like its predecessor, still no manual safety. And that bolt can just be sticky sometimes. It's just not the smoothest action in the world. Definitely likes it when you run it very firmly. Reload. Just so sticky. And there you go. Now I don't have any blanks to fire rifle grenades, and I don't even, well, I do have one 22mm practice grenade, but I don't want to lose it out here in the grass. If I did have a blank fire, or a blank for firing rifle grenades, I don't think I would do it, just simply because those 22mm practice grenades can be so hard to come by. But yeah, such a robust, interesting piece of French military history. So now let's break out the 1944 version. I think you're going to find it interesting just how similar the direct gas impingement rifle that would follow the Model 36 and the 51 and all of its sub-variants of the bolt action, just how similar the gas gun looks to the bolt actions that preceded it. The French were convinced that self-loading rifles were the future for military small arms. And they had been playing with self-loading rifles going back to pretty much almost the turn of the century. But things just kept getting in the way of progress, like Germany invading France. So they never really got to field in any great numbers self-loading rifles until after World War II. Now this one is a model of 1944, and it's a direct gas impingement rifle. This is a true direct gas impingement rifle. I have a whole video that I'll put a card to that talks about the M16 not being a direct gas impingement rifle, because it's not in the true sense of the phrase or the word. So you have gas that's tapped off. This is your gas tube right here, and it blows gas directly into the face of the bolt, which then pushes the bolt rearward. The M16 directs gas into an expansion chamber, which is an internal piston, and that piston springs the bolt and carrier away from the breech face. But anyway, like I said, I have a whole video on that. This is a true direct gas impingement rifle, and it works very well. This is actually one of the best designs when it comes to military service rifles and direct gas impingement. The French would go on to use a variation of this rifle later for quite a few years before they finally went to the MAS1944 bullpup. But anyway, we'll do a whole video on these because I have several different variations of this rifle, and it really does deserve its own video. But what's notable is the profile of the rifle. Like I said, it looks very much like the bolt actions that preceded it. I just thought that was really, really interesting. And in the 1944 model, you know, of course, we still have that bayonet out there. We still have the stacking post. We have back the completely hooded front sight. The sights are identical, front and rear, armor set, not to be messed with by the French soldiers. But what's really interesting is it has a 10-round detachable box magazine that has this external clip. The clip latches on externally to the outside of the receiver of the rifle. Have a big, large charging handle, but it also still has the capability of being fed by stripper clips. To charge the rifle, just pull the bolt to the rear and release it. Now, it is worth noting that these rifles, when shooting commercial ammunition, may go full auto. They'll slam fire because they don't have a spring on the firing pin, and the mass of the firing pin just isn't enough to prevent it from happening. It's too heavy. And so there are kits out there that will allow you to change out the firing pins, but it only goes back so far. And in terms of the evolutionary history of these rifles. So you want to be careful shooting ammunition like PPU. Make sure you hold on to it tight, because you may actually get it to double up. All right, so we have 10 rounds loaded, and we're going to shoot our challenge steel target at 100 yards. This is a very smooth shooting rifle, and again, it has that butt pad on it, the rubber butt pad that we saw on the 3651, which, coupled with the direct gas impingement of this rifle, just makes for an extremely pleasant shooting rifle in the 7.5 French. All right, bolt locks open, last shot fired. You can take that spent magazine out, insert a fresh magazine. Now, it's also noteworthy that the French learned their lesson regarding safeties. The self-loading rifles would incorporate a safety lever. So the safety blocks access to the trigger, and so to fire the rifle, you would have to flip the safety off by pushing it forward, and there you go. So the transition from a bolt action from the MAS36 series to the MAS49 or the 44 or the 40. There were 38s, 40s, 44s, 49, 56s. There was a number of different rifles in the series, but what was retained was basically the same sight picture, the sight arrangement, and the same trigger, pull, length, ergonomics. So the transition from bolt action to self-loading rifle for French military forces was a very natural one. The manual of arms was so similar that the training would be very, very simple and easy to accomplish. This is easily one of my favorite military rifles, self-loading military rifles in history. Absolutely love the 44, the 49, and all of its variants. Keep in mind, guys, I am not a historian. I'm a shooter. I love military history. I love old military firearms, but I'm not a historian. If you want to get the really good scoop on firearms like these MAS series of rifles I featured in today's video, swing by Forgotten Weapons. Check out Ian's videos. Ian loves French military rifles, and he's the go-to guy for French military rifles or just any military rifle in general. He has forgotten more information than I've ever known about firearms. Great resource. So again, check out Forgotten Weapons. I hope you enjoyed coming out to the range with me this afternoon to do some shooting with my MAS rifles, the MAS36 and the 3651. I did showcase the 1944. I'll talk about the direct gas impingement MAS rifles in another video because again, they warrant their own video. If you enjoy videos like this, please let me know in the comment section down below. Also, we are viewer supported. So there's a link down below. It's a link to Patreon. Follow that link and consider becoming part of our Patreon family and joining us on some live streams on Twitch or joining us over on our private Facebook group where we got a lot of great conversations going on. Again, follow the link down below to Patreon to become part of our family. And last but not least, please swing by and check out Copper Custom. All right, let's fire off the last 5 rounds in my 7.5 French PPU ammo and head home and do a little bit of gun cleaning. Thanks for watching, guys. Yep, I kind of like French rifles too.